Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. Today, we're going to be taking another look at a meta that's developing within Path of Exile 1. However, this is going to be a little bit different to usual. That's because this is going to be a very short video. There's not a lot to go through here. The meta itself is relatively simple. I'm talking, of course, about the player run event Gauntlet. Gauntlet, the Merciless Gauntlet that's running at the moment, is a hardcore solo self-found variant of the game that's played on extreme hard mode. Now, this is played with Freesia Ascendancies, which is a little bit different to usual, and as a result, it's got to be said the Freesia Ascendancies aren't particularly balanced. It's also not that big of a problem that they're not balanced, because ultimately, these are not something that's available all the time. That's the first thing that's a big factor here. There's about 4 or 5 of these Ascendancies, the Scavenger, the Ancestral Commander, arguably the Whisperer as well, that are just better than everything else that you can do inside the Freesia environment. However, there's another factor that's really important as well, and that's that there are probably 2 Ascendancies, maybe 3, that line up better than the rest against the unique challenges that are posed by the hardcore solo self-found game mode and by the difficulties posed by the Gauntlet. These are Ancestral Commander and Paladin, because they're extremely tanky. I guess you could also say Polytheist as well, but really it is Ancestral Commander and Paladin that are a step above everything else. Well, guess what? There are 2 criteria on which you can say an Ascendancy is better than the rest of the pack, and they intersect in one Ascendancy, the Ancestral Commander. What do we end up seeing here? Let's start by looking at the level 37 and up characters. Now, I just want to answer a question some of you are probably thinking at the moment. Why are we seeing Juggernaut, Champion, Occultist, Deadeye, Assassin, and Ascendant here? That is because if your character goes splat in hardcore solo self-found, it ends up getting transferred into permanent solo self-found. If you continue playing them there, then you'll be forced to respec into one of the classic Ascendancies. And there's a small number of players that have chosen to do that. So for instance, we have the Juggernaut here. There are 10 of these. And this just means that 10 people are playing a Marauder of some description, probably an Ancestral Commander, and their character's gone splat. They've then been dumped in permanent solo self-bound, and they've decided to keep playing the character, and when they've done so, they've then specced into Juggernaut there. So that's what's going on with these. They're not actually available as characters that you can play inside the Gauntlet. Ancestral Commander. It is a plurality, but not quite a majority, of the people who are playing level 37 plus characters, which is the top roughly 17,000 players by XP. What happens when we filter a little bit higher than that? Okay, let's go for 50. Oh, it's a bigger plurality, but it's still not a majority. I wonder what happens when we filter a bit more aggressively. Level 60 plus, it's exactly the same. Let's go for 70 this time, and now we see a threshold has been crossed. It's not just the case that you've got a plurality of 70 plus characters are playing Ancestral Commander, it is an outright majority. More people are playing Ancestral Commander than everything else put together. Okay, so that's level 70. What happens when we go 75? Oh look, it's an even bigger majority. What happens when we go level 80? Oh, a bigger majority again. Can this continue? Well, let's try 85. Oh look, it's bigger again. And let's go for 90, 61% becomes 67. There is your answer as to what the meta is in the Gauntlet. It is Ancestral Commander. It is in that pool of the most powerful of the Freesia Ascendancies, and it is also in that small selection of Freesia Ascendancies that are just really well suited to the unique challenges that are posed by Gauntlet. You'll see interestingly here that Paladin comes second. Paladin's a lot weaker than Ancestral Commander, but it also is very, very well set up for dealing with the unique challenges of the Gauntlet mode. Now, it's worth adding in here that one of the reasons people are playing Paladin, and also for that matter, Servant of Arakali is doing pretty well as well, is because this is a class Gauntlet. What that means is that there are special bonus prizes that are available for the highest performer of a particular class. This is base classes, so this is not considering all of the different Ascendancies that are available, just the highest performer for each class. And that means there is an additional incentive over and above the power of the characters to choose the Paladin. There is an additional incentive to choose the Servant of Arakali, to choose the Scavenger, and even despite this, people are still going for the strongest, the Ancestral Commander. Now, it is worth noting that this is only really relevant if you're someone who is extremely, extremely, extremely confident that you've got a chance of being competitive for the big prizes. If you aren't competitive for the big prizes, so for instance, if you don't think there is any chance of you being number 3 on the Witch, then there's no incentive for playing one of these off classes. But if you are someone who thinks they're competitive for a top 3 spot on a class, then there is definitely an advantage to go for something that is off meta. Even with that in mind, it is still the case that 60% of people are playing Ancestral Commander on level 90 plus characters. So what sort of skills are people using? Well, let's start with people who are likely in Act 9. So let's go with level 70. Now, Act 9 at level 70 is not something that's normal in Path of Exile 1. People would normally be finishing the campaign and maybe have done 6 or 7 maps by the time they hit level 70, at least the players that are skilled enough to get through the campaign on Gauntlet. But in the Gauntlet game mode, you're definitely going to be grinding some XP in some of these zones. Here we can see that we've got 27% of people are playing Earthshatter, 13% of people are playing Sunder, 9% Poisonous Concoction, 6% Volcanic Fissure of Sneck. Then we have a number of things that do indirect proxy damage. So we've got Explosive Arrow, which is delivered through Ballista. We've got Power Siphon, delivered through Mines. We've got Mirror Arrow of Bombarding Clones, the Barma archetype. So there's a whole bunch of things there, but essentially what we can see is that every build here is something that is extremely, extremely proven. We're not seeing any real wildcards showing up here. The closest thing we've got is a couple of things that are not really played very much in the normal game modes, but that are definitely known to be solid, like Herald of Agony, for instance. Herald of Agony is a very safe playstyle. Most people in Softcore Trade Enabled don't think it's worth playing because I find it just kills too slowly, but if you're playing a safe character, then that's something that's really good for you in Gauntlet. Okay, so how do things change when we start jumping up to characters that are definitely into the end game proper? Let's start with level 80 plus. And here you see it's still very much slams. 41% Earthshatter, we've got 8% playing Volcanic Fissure of Sneck, and 5% are playing Sunder. Why is it that we're seeing so many Earthshatters rather than more Volcanic Fissures of Snaking? I think that's because in the Gauntlet experience, the Labyrinth is quite a bit nastier than it is in the normal game. Definitely something where when you give additional projectiles to Azaro, you make him a lot scarier. What I think we're seeing here as a result is people aren't really repeating the Labyrinth. They're just doing it once as a major milestone, and then they're moving on and doing other content instead. Content that's a little bit safer, content that perhaps awards a little bit more XP. What about if we go a little bit further than level 80? Let's jump up to 90, and this time you'll see it is 55% of people are playing Earthshatter. Volcanic Fissure of Sneck comes in second, and it's 10%. Essentially, very much a consolidation on these builds that can hit things that are behind you, and that can hit things that you're not aware of before they're able to take you down, and at the same time, builds that are very, very tanky because they're very well set up to be played on the Ancestral Commander, or alternately, if you prefer the Paladin, then you definitely have the option of that Ascendancy as well. So that's a much shorter video than I usually do when I'm talking about a League meta, because there's just a lot less to go through. There's a lot of other Ascendancies that are interesting and that do potentially powerful things inside the Freesia Ascendancies, but they're just not well suited at all to the hardcore solo self-found environment, especially not with all of the additional difficulty that's added in Gauntlet. Anyways, if you're interested in having a look at some similar information about the base game, then I'll put a link on screen at the moment to both my video that I did on the Softcore Trade Enabled League meta for character builds, and also the Softcore Trade Enabled League meta for Atlas strategies. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and if you're playing in Gauntlet, may you choose a reasonably strong Ascendancy there.